Payon Samprati. Okay. How do you say your first name?
Pavan.
Oh, Pavan.
Yes.
Okay.
So my roommate Harsha and I used to work at this Indian restaurant back when we were doing our masters. One day, right after the rush lunch hour, there was this guy who walks in and he stares at this menu which is behind me and stares at it for a really long time and then looks at me and says in Hindi, "Do you guys not have an omelette?" And I'm like, "No, sir." And then he says, "This is such a big restaurant and you cannot even make an omelette?" And then he goes on this really long rant on how that he can't find an omelette. And there are so many restaurants around here, but nobody seems to be making a decent omelette. And I'm sitting there thinking that's probably, and he says it's very easy to make. And I'm standing there and thinking, it's probably really easy to make, so people just make it at home. And that was the time when I had just recently moved to the US, so I had not discovered IHOP myself. So I just stop him in his tracks and I say, "Sir, let me just check with my chef and see what we can do." So I turn back and through that little window, I check with Arka, our sweet Mexican chef, saying, "Hey, is it possible for us to make an omelette?" He looks back at me and he says, "See." So I ask the customer, Rakesh, to go sit down. And 2 minutes later, Arka calls me back into the kitchen and he starts speaking to me in Spanish and starts telling me all this where I only gather about 4 words, which I repeat back to him and I say, "Nada ham." He says, "Si." And then I say, "Nada omelette." He says, "Si." So I'm like, now it's a problem because Rakesh out there is waiting for an omelette and I have to figure out how to get this omelette made. I knew about 10 to 12 words in Spanish. 6 of them were numbers. So I take about 10 minutes to explain do this whole charades in English and Spanish to kind of whip out this beautiful omelette which we serve to Rakesh. And he sits down, has a bite, and he says, "This is the best omelette I've had." And he says, "I'm definitely going to come back for this omelette." And I say, "Of course," and I forget all about it up until next week. When Harsha, my roommate, walks into the room and throws his back on the floor and he says, "Who comes and orders an omelette at an Indian restaurant?" And I look up at him and say, "Rakesh." And he says, "So you were the one who made the omelette. Why would you do that?" So I say, "Never mind that, like what happened?" So this is rush hour and Rakesh walks in and he asks Harsha for an omelette. And Harsha says, "Sorry sir, we don't serve omelettes here." And he says, "Check with your chef, he knows what I want." The problem is, Arka was oof sick that day, and the chef was our owner lady who we sweetly called Auntie G. So he turns back and he checks with Auntie G. Auntie G reluctantly says, "Yeah, I'll figure something out. Yeah, just make him sit." And then, since it's rush hour, she's juggling through a bunch of different things, and she looks up at Harsha and says, "Does he want a single or a double?" Harsha checks with him and he says double, meaning he wants it with 2 eggs. Auntie understands it as double the usual. She makes it with 4 eggs. And she serves this huge fat omelette to Rakesh, who immediately says, "This is not what I wanted. This is not what I asked for. The omelette last time was better." And then the auntie is furious. She comes out and she has this fight with Rakesh. They are both going at it with each other, and somehow they reach this place where the auntie says, "You are like my son," and Rakesh feels missing his mom probably, starts eating the omelette and says, "This is fine, like I'll deal with it." And both of them decide for some reason that it was Harsha's fault. And Harsha is standing there completely flabbergasted and thinks like, "How is this my fault? Like, what happened here?" So he comes back home and he is venting and he's telling me why would you do that? And then I am sitting there, I couldn't stop laughing. For the next 6 months that I worked at that restaurant, I was hoping to run into Rakesh, But I never saw him again. He probably figured the drama was too much for an omelette, or he, like me, probably discovered IHOP. Thank you.